From the Hockey Podcast, we are back via Zoom. I have it right this week. This is 104. There's no guessing. This is 104.
104.
Last week we kind of dug into the standards of the game and the standards of the league and officiating. This week we'll share some stories and kind of talk about whatever kind of comes up.
Content is never a problem.
No, it starts out kind of as one, and then we kind of just fall right into something. So I'm not too concerned about it. So we'll wing it and we'll see where we go. We're the Hockey Podcast, episode 104. Make sure before anything you subscribe, rate, and review on the necessary audio and social and video platforms. Social media, Facebook and Instagram, War Room Hockey Podcast and at War Room Hockey Podcast, respectively. Like and follow us there, engage with us. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, and iHeartRadio. Subscribe, rate, and review, follow us there, and YouTube as well. Hit the notification bell and subscribe. War Room Hockey Podcast, episode 104. Start things off this week with a couple of headlines here. We're going to start off. We always start off with headlines, but we'll start off with one big one. World Juniors to be played in August.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, as everybody who was eligible will remain eligible, because as what I understand, which is a big deal, right? All of the eligibility from Christmas to next August should not technically change.
It says rosters to remain the same. So
okay.
If your team, whatever your team was, that's your team. So there's no new tryouts. There's no whatever. That's your team. Come back, hold a camp for 3 days or however long just to get your legs, and then go again.
Good tournament. I hated to have missed it.
It will be in the middle of August in Alberta, it says.
Well, let's hope that fans can attend.
It'll be a new competition, which means we forget the results in December. So they're going to start from scratch. Forget the results that happened in December. Tournament for players under 20 began in Edmonton, Alberta. Edmonton, Red Deer, Alberta, postponed. Let's see. Czechia and Russia each had to forfeit a preliminary round game. 2022 World Junior Championship could consist of the same rosters each country had in December, regardless of whether those players turn 20 before the tournament.
It's the way it should be.
So even if they're 20, even if they're technically not eligible, hold the same rosters, play the tournament, and then there you go, even if they're aged out at that point.
As it should be. And too bad for the last year or two. Kids didn't get to finish their careers in college or major junior or junior A or high school for that matter, or any place else.
And if you play in August, you won't have to worry about a number of the guys not being able to go. So,
right.
So like if the rosters remain the same here, I'm reading the article, the top 5 players selected in the 2021 NHL draft would play. Owen Power, Mason McTavish, Kent Johnson, were all on Team Canada's roster. Matt Beniers and Luke Hughes were playing for the United States. Jake Sanderson, selected by the Senators in the 2020 draft, was captain for the States. Let's see. Same groups, it looks like, so they'll stay in the same groups and everything. United States in Group B, along with Russia, Sweden, Slovakia, and Switzerland. Canada, Group A, with Finland, Czechia, Germany, and Austria. IIHF to reintroduce the relegation round, which was originally eliminated for this year. The loser of the best of 3 relegation round will be placed with Belarus. Okay. Right, because Belarus won relegation in their buy-in to it. So now whoever loses relegation is replaced by Belarus. Yeah. Tournament to still be held in Alberta. Scheduled to be played in Edmonton and Red Deer. So we'll see how it goes. If they follow through with lifting mandates and restrictions like they have in some provinces, it shouldn't be an issue. We'll see how well they stick to doing that. I'm always nervous when politics and government are in play, that it's a political move to get a protest or something to back off, and then all of a sudden conveniently, oh, we have reason to bring them back. So it's part of the reason why not to get off track, but when you hear and read the news headlines of Saskatchewan and Alberta and Ontario getting to the point of lifting restrictions and mandates and kind of reopening and removing vaccine passport stuff and all this stuff, I'm not jumping for joy, because these are the same people that said 2 weeks to flatten the curve. So
you have good
I'm not jumping for joy yet. Maybe in a year from now, if the mandates have been gone and they stay gone, maybe I can breathe and kind of go, okay. But I'm not holding my breath, unfortunately. So we'll see what happens. But
what else is
the big headline? World Junior for August is the reported time.
Yep. Love that. Everybody who listens knows what fans we are of the World Junior Tournament, and have been since, in my case, way before you were born. But it's always been a big deal in our house.
Question for you. What kind of credibility do you give to the NHL's lovely power rankings?
Power rankings are nothing more than goal differential. That's all they're based on. One metric, doesn't wins and losses and everything else. Goal differential is the one. It's the one analytic in power rankings. Any kid in grade 3 can do power rankings. So they really mean nothing. They come out every week. If you win 4 in a row last week and you have a goal differential of 2 or 3 per game, you're going to jump up the power rankings, no matter who you beat. If you go 2-2 and you squeeze out wins over Tampa and Colorado by a goal, you're going to probably go down in the power rankings, even though you beat the 2 best teams in the league. So they mean, to answer your question, nothing. They mean nothing to me.
How detailed would you make power rankings in order to make them mean something?
I'm different from a lot of people. The only analytic I care about is wins. I don't care about save percentage, Corsi, Fenwick.
So go off then the last 10 games, right? Like the NHL does on their standings, previous 10 games, and teams have their records out of 10 games. What's their win-loss in those 10 games? Go off of that.
Power rankings is something I never look at and don't care about, and this is a personal matter. As you know, you can go 3-0 this week and not play that well. You could go 0-3 and play great. Your goaltender might be on his head, stopping 45 a night. He might be terrible and give up 4 on 19. Your top line might be -6. Anything can happen. The only thing that really matters is wins and losses. And it doesn't matter how, but it also matters when. So mid-season power rankings, I pay no attention to. The power rankings sort themselves out from game 83 on, which is where everything matters. And you might be playing great. You might run into a hot goaltender, a Jordan Binnington from 2 or 3 years ago. You never know. So I guess to answer your question, no matter how you look at it, it's not something I care about. That's all.
Well, final headline before we jump into the meat of this week. University of Michigan is Michigan coach Mel Pearson has been accused of instructing players to lie on their COVID tracing forms last year. So the team and the coach and the university are being investigated during last year's NCAA tournament supposedly instructing his players to lie on their tracing forms.
Can I ask what a COVID tracing form is?
I would assume, and I'm happy to not know this, and it's ridiculous to even have it, but I'm assuming it has to do with testing positive and who you were around when you did, and so they can trace it back to who might be exposed and all this stuff in order to basically determine if, like we saw last year, if a school needs to forfeit.
Put that
We saw a
in.
number of schools last year and even the year before have to forfeit and not even get to play a national tournament game because of the lovely, wonderful COVID rules. So my guess is that's what a COVID tracing form is.
If that's the
I
case,
can't say.
and I presume that it is, that makes perfectly good sense. If that's the case, put the COVID tracing forms in the file with the power rankings and shut the door. They mean nothing. If a kid, these are the best conditioned 19, 20-year-old athletes in the world. They're asymptomatic. It's irrelevant, even if they test positive. So, we've covered this ad nauseum for 2 years. I don't even know what it is, don't want to know what it is, don't care what it is. You got perfectly healthy young athletes, and none of the rest of it matters. What's happening to a senior center in Italy does not have any relevance to NCAA hockey or anything else for that matter. Boom.
The interesting thing here, I'm reading this, the interesting thing too, they're looking into it like it's such a big deal, and yet Michigan was one of the teams last year who had to withdraw.
Right.
So it's like one of those things where it's like the lie didn't lead to a national title. It's not like every team has to follow these regulations of COVID tracing, but
yeah,
Michigan lied, won a national championship,
right.
And now it calls into question. Michigan had to forfeit last year. They had to withdraw. So it really didn't matter anyway. It's interesting to me. The other allegations here, apparently, and again, could be true, and I don't want to dismiss anything of the nature of these allegations and trivialize it in any fashion. All I'm saying is, reading from an article, outside person here, there's no way to know how true it is, especially in today's culture. But some of the other allegations against Pearson states that Pearson and Director of Hockey Operations Rick Bancroft discriminated against female staffers and created a toxic work environment. Pearson retaliated against a student athlete for raising concerns about the hockey team's culture. And Bancroft knew about sexual misconduct committed by Anderson. And Anderson, I believe, Robert Anderson was investigated for decades-long sexual abuse from 1990, who was an employee from 1966 to 2003. So back then,
well, it happened at Penn State football. These things need to be handled internally. As soon as the NCAA gets involved, now it becomes political fodder. The NCAA is as corrupt as the International Olympic Committee, the Center for Disease Control, the United Nations. They're all money grabbers. None of them have any integrity. None of them have any credibility. Keep them out of it. If somebody is committing some kind of sexual crime, call the police. Look after it internally and have mechanisms, just like we talked about with the Chicago Blackhawks, have mechanisms to police these things from the inside. If that doesn't work, that's what we have law enforcement for.
Yep. Exactly. Speaking of the Olympic Committee, controversy there in figure skating. Don't know if you heard that.
A figure skating controversy?
15-year-old Russian figure skater.
Yeah. Landed 2 quads, am I right?
She's fantastic. She's tremendous to be 15 years old and to do that stuff. But she tested positive before the Olympics even started for 3 substances that have to do with a heart defect. She doesn't have a heart defect. And so what it is it's substances that basically help your heart rate And if you don't have a heart problem, then the implication is that it's helping your endurance and helping your heart rate so that you don't get fatigued as quickly cardiovascularly. That's my assumption on it all. They investigated.
A banned substance?
What's that?
Is it a banned substance?
Well, they investigated 3 substances found, one of which was banned. And they have deemed that she's able to compete. Now, brings up some questions. Nobody's happy. The commentators, Tara Lipinski and Johnny Weir, even said on air during her program after she was cleared that they are not, that this isn't right, that it's not fair, not just, right? Everybody knows in these high level competitions that you test positive on a drug test, you don't play. So why is she allowed? However, you also cross into the territory of she's 15 years old. So how much of these substances did she know she was ingesting? How much control did she have over it? It is Russia, after all.
How many times does this happen to Russian athletes? This is a every 4 years event in both winter and summer games, I think, for the last generation or so.
If you're going summer to winter, it's 2 years.
But
4 years summer to summer, 4 years winter to winter. But yeah.
Now, are they, so since Russia was banned, are they the Russian Olympic Committee or Russian Olympic athletes or some nonsense like that?
They're deemed the ROC. The problem is the ROC, they still have their Russian colors, right? So anyways, it doesn't make any sense. The point is that she was allowed to compete. Nobody thinks it's right. Nobody thinks it's fair. You do get into the debate of she's 15 years old. Russian or not, that's a lot of weight to carry at that age at a high level, at a big stage. How much did she know about the substances? How much was she told? How much blame, even at 15, does she carry, if any at all? There's a lot of things. She's now facing all the backlash, and any adult around her or coach that might have been the one doing this doesn't get any attention for it. So it creates a big kind of moral dilemma. You remember at the Summer Olympics that U.S. runner who was banned from competing in the entire Olympics, not just an event, because she tested positive for marijuana. So it creates kind of that double standard. So interesting stuff. Thought I'd bring that up since you mentioned the Olympic Committee, but
yeah. Well, this
anyways,
is just
we're not going to carry on. We're going to dive into the meat of this, but I just it was relevant to your mention of the corruptness of the Olympic Committee. I thought I'd bring it up. So anyway, this week I know you have a few stories you want to start off with, but this week we are going to touch. We're not going to carry on a lot about it. We say that every week and we end up doing it. We're going to try to keep ourselves composed to not carry on for 40 minutes about this one topic, but we are going to address, because it needs to be addressed, the Jordan Subban and Panetta ECHL incident.
Oh my!
First of all, before you dive into your stories, I just want to give my thought real quick, and it's
please do.
As simple as this. I don't want to take anything away from Jordan, from Kadri, for all the criticisms we throw at him, even Akeem Alou. I don't want to take anything away from those people simply because at the end of the day, we all, black or white, male or female, we all go through things in our lives, and we all go through things in our lives that others may not be aware of. I'm simply not going to say that these players, these people didn't face ignorant hate from somebody somewhere.
No.
I'm not going to say that didn't occur, and I'm not going to say that doesn't affect. I'm not going to say that doesn't have an effect on you. It has an effect on me as a 30-year-old, wondering if even to this day, I still battle wondering if somebody likes me or not.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna undermine that or trivialize that. What I will say is I do not like sport, entertainment. What I don't like is this idea that because you belong to a group, black or female or homosexual or anything like that, that you can throw accusations, no matter how false, and they're believed without any investigation. So Panetta is not allowed to share his side of the story. He has not been allowed to share his side of the story. He tried, and the world condemned him for it. Morgan Wallen says the N-word on a doorbell cam while drinking with his buddies, and he's not allowed to the CMT Awards. Nothing. The other aspect to it is this. Panetta came out and he apologized. Morgan Wallen came out and he apologized. They're doing the things that the oh so wonderful Black Lives Matter and Hockey Diversity Alliance shit, what they say they want, and that's to be understood, to be listened to. They want other people to educate themselves on how to properly communicate around them and do these things, which is, I don't fully agree with that stuff, but the point is they're doing it. And yet it's still not enough. They're not given a second chance. They're still being condemned. So they're undermining the very thing they claim they want. Panetta understood. He understood when the adrenaline died down how his gesture on the ice may have come across in an inappropriate way. And he approached Subban to clear the air. And Subban, according to Andrew Shaw, who is Panetta's cousin, and this was on the Cam and Strick podcast interview with Andrew Shaw. According to Andrew Shaw, again, I'm not saying it as if it's true, but this is according to Andrew Shaw, Subban got in his face and said, "I don't give a shit, I'll slit your throat." This is the society and the things that we are dealing with right now. And look, I watched the video. I'm not going to say one way or the other whether it was a racist gesture that Panetta made. What I will say is Panetta tried to clear the air and do the very thing that you claim you want. Understanding, bridging a gap, whatever you want to call it, and you turned him away, but you turned him away with vile threats.
Yeah.
That's not how this is supposed to work. But I will say this, and then I'll let you go. I will say this. In general, the one thing I will say is I don't like the gestures.
No, I don't.
Racist or not, I don't like gesturing. Whether it's a fight, knocking a guy out and then silencing the crowd, or go to sleep, or hand across the throat, or any type of strongman stuff, enough. This isn't the NFL. This isn't the NBA where you slam dunk and you beat your chest. This is no matter what direction in society that the game of hockey goes in terms of bringing in a younger group and expressing yourself and loosening dress codes or whatever. Okay, but the gesturing, there still has to be a level of respect, and the gesturing, I don't condone, racist or not. Enough with the gesturing.
Now, you know me, I've told you many times over, I wouldn't even do the flyby. So I'm just not that. I mean, I understand the adrenaline as much as the next guy, but there was a whole world of Joe Sakic's and Gordie Howe's and people like that who never celebrated at all, and they were the best that ever lived. So let that be your guide. For all of its good sounding intentions, all of this diversity crap has done nothing but make the divide worse. It's made everybody really sensitive. It's made everybody on pins and needles. Now you can't say or do anything without offending somebody, because the offended person, that sells copy. They want, the media loves to hear how Jordan Subban has been offended somehow. They don't want to hear how it was supposed to have been a strongman gesture and how Mr. Panetta didn't realize that it could be perceived as a racially motivated gesture. he apologized for having it being misconstrued. He didn't apologize for making a racial gesture. He apologized for having it been misunderstood. Subban refused to take that apology, which makes him a small, petty, nasty little person. And it makes him a person who is only out to sell copy. Akeem Alou, I don't know him. I have nothing against him. I have nothing for him. He played 13 years earning a paycheck around the world playing hockey. Nobody ever said, well, you can't play because you're black. He had a fantastic professional career. He made noise about some nonsense 11, 12 years ago in the AHL, and he got himself a job for it. Now, people are trying to prove how woke they are by hiring only on the basis of gender and race or sexual orientation, which is the thing we've been trying to get away from for the last 50 years. Whether it's hiring or firing or renting somebody an apartment or approving a loan or whatever, we've been trying to get away from basing all those decisions on race, gender, and sexual orientation or religious background for my entire lifetime. And now we're forced to go back to it. So now I have to hire the black guy or the lady or the homosexual, because if I don't, I'll be accused of something and be drummed out of business, which is nonsense. Real quickly, as you know, I quit skating almost a year ago. One of our most beloved guys is a very large guy. I wouldn't call him fat. He played college hockey, really good guy, but he's a large man. He has and is still made fun of unmercifully because of his size. What I'm getting to here is this game, which has always been open to everybody. This game does not discriminate. It discriminates on the basis of whether you stink at the game or whether you're just a genuine asshole. It's very discriminatory that way.
Or whether you can afford to play. And
right. And look, it's not.
You and I can both agree that the affordability aspect is something that you can work toward changing. That is what you can possibly do. But the game has never once, nor will it ever be, closed off to anybody.
Never
if you
has
can afford to play house. If you can afford to skate, go skate. If you can afford to. From there, then it gets, if you want to play at a high level, then it rightfully, just like Navy SEALs or anything else, it rightfully has a selection process that is rightfully very stringent and very... So
how disgusting would it be to be a young black player or gay or anything else and have somebody come to you and say, we'd like to have you on our team because you're black. And we know that you need a break because you're black and you couldn't possibly make it on your own. So we're going to gift you this spot over a couple of white kids or a couple of straight kids or whatever, because we know you are incapable of doing anything on your own. How disgusting is that? How demeaning. Anyway, our guy is large and he gets made fun of constantly. They love him, but they make fun of his size. I got hit, I took a deflection, first or second shift about 4 or 5 years ago. Took a deflection, hit me in the orbital bone. I swelled up right away, turned purple. 20 minutes later, a guy I know, I was playing against him, one of my favorite guys, he comes by, he skates by me during a whistle, and he goes, "Rower, you big pussy, you bruised like a peach." And I'm standing there, my left eye's kind of swelled shut. And I love this guy. We play golf together. We drink beer together. He's a wonderful guy. But this is the way the game is. This is the way people treat each other in the dressing room. You better hope they're making fun of you, because if they aren't, they don't like you. That's all there is to it. We were at about 12 years old or so. I was at a church camp, and all we did was play hockey. And imagine a dorm full of 12-year-olds doing nothing but playing hockey all day. And one of the kids, well, we wrapped him in toilet paper and set him on fire. Like, how ignorant is that? It wasn't because of, nobody even cared what the deal was. He was the little brother of one of our best friends. But it was just kids being kids.
Yep.
Like, I just don't get why being offended and being a victim is so popular. I don't want to be a victim. You've never wanted to be a victim of anything.
Well, it makes you wonder what the motive and intentions are, because it really does. It is money, but I say it rhetorically. It makes you wonder what the motive and intention is, because let's give human beings at least some semblance of benefit of the doubt.
Right.
That there's at least some smarts to them. They have to understand, you would think, on some level, that all this BS does the exact opposite of what you are saying you want. It does the exact opposite. You say you want educated people. You say you want understanding. You say you want sensitivity. You say you want equality. You say you want to be heard. You say you want all these things. And then at every turn, you undermine that by not allowing people to make mistakes, not allowing people to correct those mistakes, not allowing people to educate themselves. It flies in the face of the very thing that you claim you want. Black or woman or white, doesn't matter. There has to be an understanding that we are human beings. And the problem with this is it sets a standard that nobody can touch. Now you have to be perfect. Now you can't say anything wrong, do anything wrong. Now we're not only monitoring your words or your actions, now we're monitoring your gestures. We're monitoring your facial expressions.
How about this one?
So it makes it very difficult.
How many times have you seen somebody like for generations? Okay, first of all, every Indian guy that I ever skated with, if they made the team, they were just as good as everybody else. Every single one of them was nicknamed Chief.
Yep.
Every one of them. How many times have you seen guys and the Indians themselves score a goal and give it the old, right?
Bow and arrow, yeah.
Well, PK Subban does the bow and arrow. Seen him do it a dozen times. Is that some racially hateful gesture? I don't think so. He was just excited that he scored a goal. This is all just a load of crap. And as the saying goes, when everything is racist, nothing is racist. There is nothing racist about our game. Willie O'Ree never said anything about being a black player. He was just a player. He was just blessed to have been a player. He never made a big deal about the fact that he was black. The league and all of its wokeness came to him many years ago.
He's now a puppet of the league.
Yeah. And made him an ambassador. He didn't ask for it. He was just a guy. He wasn't a black hockey player. He was just a hockey player. And he was really, really happy to be so. This is something I don't understand. How you could be Matt Dumba or Alou or anybody else cashing an NHL paycheck and say that somehow this game is racist. Are there anecdotes of racism and hatefulness? Look, they're going to make fun of you if you get divorced. They're going to make fun of you if you get an impaired driving, if you have to enter substance abuse rehab. They're going to make fun of if you're overweight, no matter what it is, you're going bald. They're going to make fun of you. Do we need to create victim groups for all of them? No. Do we need to continue to make everybody painfully aware of who the black players are? Let's not. Let's just call them all players. Let's call everybody a player.
Well, it sets a dangerous precedent, because what it does is it creates a situation where now if you have a real moment of true hate and racism,
it just gets lost.
how do you know? It's the same argument to be made of women who falsely accuse men of sexual assault.
Right.
Well, at some point, that very woman or somebody else might be assaulted, and now who believes them?
Right.
So it's one of those. It sets a dangerous precedent, and again, I see here we are being careful with how we say things because we're all on eggshells. Again, I don't want to come across like victim blaming or doing anything like that. I understand that in the case of women with sexual assault or abuse, that it's very horrible, but it's also difficult to come forward.
Sure it is.
It's difficult to come forward. I get it. But that doesn't change the fact, no matter how difficult it is, that if you want justice or you want to be believed, then you tell the truth. And if you weren't assaulted, then maybe you don't say that you were. Right? So the point is, it sets a dangerous precedent of how will you be believed if everything is assault or everything is racist.
Yep.
Or everything is a hate crime against the gay community, or everything this or that. And then all of a sudden, something truly hateful and despicable happens.
Yep.
And now you've got very cynical people going, well, I just don't believe you.
Yeah. That's the 8th one this week. I don't know. What do we make of this? So one last tidbit here. This has been 30 years ago now, but we had a full-on team hazing event, and it was a blast. This kid, he was the youngest kid on the team. He turned 21 years old. Great kid. Everybody loved him. We went to the bar, started having a few pops, and then he started to get the sense that something was going on, and he tried to take off. So we're chasing this poor kid down the street, and he's in his, basically the underwear, the undergarments from his gear, because we had started tearing his clothes off. He's tearing down this street. We catch him, tackle him, basically like pallbearer, carry him back to the rink, tape him to the training table, full on shaved the kid. And this is before, people were happy to shave themselves. Shaved this kid with a rusty straight razor. And it was almost Christmas time. So at the end of the night, one, without being too graphic, one was painted green and one was painted red. And then the kid, we took him out to the bar, and we just got, the rink had a bar in it. We took him to the bar, and the poor guy just got horrendously overserved. I came in the next morning, morning skate. I opened the bathroom door and hit him in the head. He had passed out on the floor on this cold, dirty, filthy concrete floor, and I flung the door open and conked him right in the head. And today, we would all be in jail for that. Or it would be a hate crime because he, might belong to some put upon group so hard done by. But it was just all in fun. It was because we loved the guy. We joked about it, still joke about it to this day. I'm just telling you, life was simpler when people didn't enjoy being victims. And
it's a whole victim community. And it's what you see, it's what you're seeing. It's a whole victim community, and I don't understand it. I don't understand the appeal of being one. We should all not want to be one.
Yeah, I'll make it on my own.
I won't name names, but I saw a social media post a month or two ago from a girl I used to go to school with, who's fully in the victim category, and I don't remember word for word, but it was along the lines of why should I have to do anything to protect myself? It's on men to not do this, or something of that nature. And I'm like, you know what? You're 100% correct. It's on men to not be complete heinous animals and doing these acts. But you know what? It still doesn't mean that it won't happen. So keep your head on a swivel.
We're standing open.
So take self-defense classes, lock your doors, don't walk down an alley at 2 a.m. by yourself, don't do these things. And you'll go a long way helping yourself. But it's this idea of victim mentality of, I don't have to do anything to help myself. It should be on them because woe is me. And you're seeing it with COVID.
Yeah. Everybody's
in Canada alone, over 90% of the population is vaccinated.
Yep.
Fully vaccinated. Now, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of the fact that fully vaccinated and yet you still catch it.
Right.
But fully vaccinated and yet, based on the way things are going right now, if you've been following it, it's on the 90% to make the 10% feel comfortable.
Yeah. Well,
or backward.
10% to make
the 10%. Right, you're right. Sorry, I had that backwards. It's on the 10%. First of all, the 10% are terrorists and evil and horrible and killers and all this stuff. Yeah. But it's on the 10% to make the 90% feel better, even though it's 90% vaccinated. And that's just Canada alone. I'd have to look it up to know the specific percentage of the entire world.
Well,
but yet we're still in this idea that you wear masks and you can't do anything because it's on the unvaccinated to make the people that are vaccinated feel safe. Enough with the victim stuff. Learn to live with it. Move forward.
Look after yourself.
Look after yourself. If you are that uncomfortable, guess what? Don't go outside.
Yeah.
Plain and simple as that. Enough. Anyway, see, we carried on a lot about it. See, told you. We'll move on. Question for you, and we're going to move on here because I want to transition. War Room the Hockey Podcast, episode 104. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe, rate and review, follow along with us on the audio platforms, social media, and YouTube as well. We'll touch on those again at the end of the episode. But War Room the Hockey Podcast, at War Room the Hockey Podcast on all those platforms. Subscribe, rate and review, follow along, engage with us. Episode 104. Question for you. Thoughts on, and I'm not gonna say that there's anything wrong with it now, simply because there's no rule against it. Thoughts on whether or not the league needs to adjust the handling of LTIR in terms of cap circumvention. Does the league need to address that? Because I don't want to undermine or assume that Mark Stone, for example, is not as hurt as he is.
No,
there is an idea that, and it's hard to ignore a coincidence that you're in a position to be able to put Mark Stone on LTIR when Jack Eichel's ready to come back. Does the league need to address these things and maybe make an adjustment to how that's handled? Or is it one of those things where clearly it's okay, you can do it too, so it is what it is?
Well, it's clearly okay. It's clearly within the rules that the Board of Governors has set up. It is clearly within bounds of every piece of operating system that the league uses. Kucherov set a great precedent. They happen to win a cup doing that, which makes it a little bit tougher for the other 31 teams to handle. Now we're seeing it with Mark Stone. I don't doubt that Mark Stone is hurt. He's an honest guy. But is this a carefully planned coincidence? Of course it is. Eichel's ready to go within 72 hours of Stone being put on LTIR. It's a mathematical necessity, and it is within the boundaries of the way the Board of Governors has agreed to operate. Should they change it? I think they should. I don't think you should be able to manipulate the cap like that. If a guy gets put on LTIR, there probably should be some restriction on him coming back during the playoffs.
Well, that would make it
my way of fixing it.
I agree. I've thought about it. Make it about how they do it with your name on the Stanley Cup. You have to play a certain number of games, right? Well, you have to only miss a certain number of games to be eligible to come back in playoffs. And you can be on LTIR, but if you're on LTIR for 60 days and you miss 25 games, then now you can't come back. Something like that. Because it's one of those things where teams and organizations, they know that they can. I'm not saying that they can't. Clearly, whether we agree with doing it or not, it's well within the rules. But they know going in what the salary cap is, and they know what players make, and they know what players want, and all this stuff. And yet you go out like Vegas has done since their inception, and they try and make a super team by chasing literally every trade bait, every free agent, no matter who the name is, no matter what they're asking, to the point of, from a pure fan perspective, it's quite annoying, to be quite honest. But nonetheless, they go after that, and then they now get Jack Eichel. With all due respect to Alex Tuch, Jack Eichel makes a lot more money than Alex Tuch. So now you've got a cap situation while Stone's making $9 million and Fleury makes his money and Shea Theodore, go down the list.
Yeah.
It's well within the rules. We've established that. But they also know going in what the cap is, and yet they do this. So
like I said, it's carefully planned coincidence. That's all it is.
All I'm saying, though, is to me there should be a check and balance put in place then, that, okay, if you want to do this, that's fine, but you're going to have to make a sacrifice come playoff time if your LTIR misses X amount of games. We'll let you do it, but if LTIR misses X amount of games, they can't play in the playoffs. I'm not saying that Tampa Bay doesn't win a Stanley Cup if Kucherov's not in the lineup. They're a talented enough team. They likely win 2 Stanley Cups, whether Kucherov's in the lineup or not.
Right.
All I'm saying in that regard, though, is optically, you take your $8 million Kucherov, or however much he makes, and you put him on LTIR for the entirety of the regular season. 2 seasons in a row, Kucherov played maybe 8 games, 12 games, and then the rest of the regular season he's on LTIR. And then, coincidentally, he's perfectly fine and healthy at the start of the playoffs. Optically, it doesn't look.
It's obvious. It doesn't just look suspicious. It's blatant. It's obvious, and it's not really even. They're not even trying to be secretive about it. Mark Stone will make a miraculous recovery about the 3rd week of April, and he'll be fine to play however long they last in the playoffs. What they do in the off season to get under the cap, who knows? But this is one of those build it for this year deals. And if you can manipulate and stay competitive next year, while having somehow both Stone and Eichel in the lineup, great. We'll see. But this is the purpose of the cap, is to level the field a little bit for everybody. This doesn't necessarily allow for that to happen. And I think the fact that if I were any one of the other 30 owners, other board of governors, I would look at a team that's won 2 consecutive Stanley Cups doing this, and a team that is poised to make another deep run in Vegas doing the same thing. And I'd say, fellas, when we get together this spring, it's time to change this up a little bit. This is too easy to get around. It's too easy to pick somebody up at the deadline that pick up 3 guys that put you $24 million over the cap, win a cup, and then blow up the team. So you just can't let it go, or they've already figured out how to game the system. There needs to be a punishment for it. And that would be, like you said, making it restricted as to how many games somebody could play in the playoffs if they've been on LTIR for more than, your basic 15 days of injured reserve or something like that. But if they go on long term, there's got to be something put in place to make it so that you can't just blow up the cap by 30% and then fix it in the off season. I want to be careful.
Would you suggest maybe a waiver wire too? Would that be a solution? So like LTIR. So just since we're talking about it, use it as an example. Mark Stone goes on LTIR. You're now cap compliant as a result because now Jack Eichel's here to play. Mark Stone comes back. Now you have to be cap compliant even in the playoffs. So now here's our newly implemented in-season waiver wire, for example. And there is an in-season. Players are placed on waivers all the time, but you get my point.
Right.
In-season waiver wire. So now Marchessault, just to name a name, has to be waived, and he has to go. Somebody has to go to get cap compliant again. And if that means another playoff team picks him up, then okay, another playoff team picks up Marchessault, but now you get cap compliant, something like that. But this something to create a situation where you're not in the playoffs over the cap. Well, whether the cap comes into play in the playoffs or not, and I know money really doesn't come into play during the playoffs, but the point is, just in general, something to be cap compliant even in the playoffs, whether it's you missed this many games so now you can't play, or it's waiver wire or something. Because optics. Yep. Optically now, back-to-back Stanley Cups for Tampa Bay with Kucherov in both of those seasons being LTIR'd. And now Vegas, who's in 4 or 5 seasons of their existence, have been to the conference finals four times and the Stanley Cup final once. And now they're doing the LTIR thing. Something's got to give.
I totally agree. I would create a system by which LTIR carries with it some playoff ineligibility. Whether that's a proportional amount, you're ineligible for 1 game in the playoffs for every 3 games that you missed in the regular season, or whatever the case may be. I don't know. But I want to make sure that our listeners, if you're not familiar, LTIR is not a victim group. It's not a specialty group. It stands for long-term injured reserve. There's nothing to do with lesbian and trans and things like that. It's long-term injured reserve. So don't go blowing us up on Twitter. Actually, maybe you should. That's really good publicity. Go on social media.
Clickbait. We need it.
Absolute havoc about War Room, the hockey podcast, because that really,
it's like walking into an airport and saying bomb. Next thing you know, everybody's looking at you. So,
hey, let me say this: based on what we're seeing right now, at just past the midway point, Jared Bednar is underrated. He does not get nearly enough credit for what he's done with his team. He is right with John Cooper for the best in the league, without any question. He is just as good as it gets, and he does not get his due. This is a team that plays really hard every night, especially against the best. Looks like they've got their goaltending situation fairly solidified, and I look at them for a long run. They're going to be.
If Kemper plays the way he did last night, down the stretch and in the playoffs, I've got no issues.
Yep.
How he looked last night was tremendous. I have not seen Kemper look that well, even in the good games when he stood on his head in Arizona. When he was in Arizona, he didn't look that good. He's looked tremendous last night. So
and the only reason that Dallas snapped the streak is because Ottinger just this game fell out of the sky into his lap. And he's not that good. He's not been that good for a long time. He doesn't have that body of work. He just caught one of those 50 save nights, lightning in a bottle, and it's just one of those deals. You run into that. That's why it's a good team game. But they look great. Bednar gets not enough credit.
Well, there's a lot of aspects, and I've said it for several years. There's a lot of aspects to Colorado that doesn't get a lot of credit.
Yeah.
Everybody from the internet trolls to even the supposed professionals on TV, they love whenever they lose a game to just rail. But when they win or things are going right or Bednar looks great or anything like that, does McKinnon win the Hart Trophy? Does Bednar win Coach of the Year? Does this or that happen? Do they get their praise? Nope. So
just so I don't sound like Jack Edwards here, the other guy that he gets a lot of credit, but boy, on a year like this, it's not enough, is Mike Sullivan in Pittsburgh, because they have had stretches of huge names out of their lineup. And every single year since he took over for Dan Bilesman, I believe, way back when, they've been right in the conversation, right at the very top of the league. Even when they flunk out in the first round, they're as good. They should shock nobody. And that goes to coaching. It also goes to leadership, because with Crosby and Malkin, Letang in that lineup, that's pretty hard to match. But this is where, at this time of the year, as the deadline approaches and the playoffs are not far away, this is where you start to see the real sorting out process. There's already 8. We already know who the 8 teams in the East are going to be. There's only 9 in the West that are really capable of making it in. So between Dallas, Anaheim, and LA, somebody's going to fall out. But this is a great time of year. And last night was as good of a regular season game as I've seen all year long between Vegas and Colorado.
Yeah, it looked good.
What else is
thoughts on Arizona's move to a 5,000 seat arena, which, by the way, isn't supposed to be finished construction until December. So now they're in a situation where, what do we do ice-wise, because we're now leaving Gila or whatever it's called today and going to ASU's place, but ASU's new arena isn't going to be completed till December. So,
well, 5,000 seats is more than they will draw unless Calgary or Vancouver or Edmonton are in town, or Winnipeg. But if you've ever been to a Phoenix Coyotes game, like Arizona Coyotes, it's 80% snowbirds anyway, most of the winter.
what is Bettman's hard on for Arizona? What is Bettman's hard on for Arizona?
I don't know. I guess he just likes the stability of franchises not moving around. But that franchise has been in Phoenix for what now? Since the mid-90s. They've been there for 25, almost 30 years. And they've produced Austin Matthews.
Yeah.
And they've been eating probably $30 or $35 million of the league's profit sharing or revenue sharing money for the last 15 years. What's the cost of keeping that franchise there?
I read a thing where somebody said Arizona should have moved instead of Atlanta.
Well, they both should have. But here's the difference. And the one thing that I'll caution everybody on, as with an argument or a shoving match in practice or anything else, wins make it all go away. Carolina was 5-6 years ago, they were abysmal. They drew hundreds. Miami. Nashville hasn't really had this problem for quite a long time, but some of these franchises, in Atlanta was right in that mix. You don't make the playoffs for 10 years. You can't win. Nobody goes. People stay away in droves. Now, all of a sudden, the ownership is hemorrhaging money. The league has to prop them up. And a few wins, in a market that's fragile, like the newer ones like Carolina and Florida and Arizona, when you don't have a generational fan base and you put together 5 or 6 losing seasons, that's not like Toronto or Montreal. Those buildings are still going to be full. Boston, Chicago, the Rangers, those guys can all have tough times and rebuild, and people will still show up and be loyal. It's not the case in the newer markets. And I know those are 20 or 30-year-old markets, some of them, but they're still relatively new. So to answer the question, 5,000 seats should be more than enough for the foreseeable future, as bad as they are. And if they peddle Chychrun and Ekman Larson or anybody else in this rebuild, holy smokes, they may want to start. They may want to schedule ASU.
Yeah. Larson's already gone. He's in Vancouver. Chychrun's Chikrin's ready to move. I don't know if Chikrin himself is ready to move as much as Arizona is ready to move him, but nonetheless, he's ready to be moved. So we'll see what happens.
So what's coming up next week?
They may clear out next week. Why don't you ask me next week?
Oh, okay.
Too early to tell.
Where have I heard that before?
Too early to tell. Closing out this week. Let's close out this week with a standings update where we see things kind of falling seed-wise, where they stand right now, if things were to happen right now, things like that heading into next week. And next week we can start really diving in, do our homework, really kind of dive into what we see happening at the trade deadline and things, because a lot could happen at the deadline, with still a flat cap and these different things. A lot still could happen. So we can touch on that a little bit next week. But closing out this week, we'll do a standings update.
One thing you have to look for before you start looking at playoff seedings and who's going to be in and who's going to be out and who's going to have home ice, there is still some discrepancy in the games played.
Oh, 100%. Like I'm looking at it right now.
Because of some of the teams being shut down for stretches that others weren't. You got Toronto's played 46, Pittsburgh's played 50.
Yeah. So look, there is a discrepancy.
51.
Yeah. Looking at it, we'll touch on that as we run through it. Pittsburgh is tops of the Metropolitan, with 50 games played with 70 points. Florida tops the Atlantic, 48 games played with 71 points. Florida is also tops of the East at that point. The way it would fall there, if things happen now, I know there's a discrepancy in games played. If things happen now, Carolina would play the Rangers. Tampa would have Toronto. Pittsburgh would get Boston. And Florida would get Washington. Or sorry, reverse. Florida would get Boston because they're the top seed, and Pittsburgh would get Washington. The way it fell right now.
Some great first round matchups.
I know that there's discrepancies in games played. Boston's only played 47 games. Toronto's only played 46. The real discrepancy in games played, though, is the Canadian markets, given everything. And for example, in the East, the real Canadian markets in the East, Ottawa and Montreal, they're at the very bottom. So they could have 15 games in hand and likely would not earn their way back.
Yeah. The playoffs, the eight teams are set in the East.
Pretty well. Detroit is surprisingly a few good bounces and a 4-game win streak outside of a wild card spot. So, I mean, it's pretty well set. I don't see Detroit scratching their way in there. They're not there yet, especially when you come up against Florida or Toronto or Tampa or somebody, but they're at least right there getting a look. So, but that's how it would fall now. Eastern Conference wise, let's really quick touch on where we see the seeding finishing. So right now, Florida's the top of the Atlantic. Does Florida stay at the top of the Atlantic?
They've been really consistent. So probably so. Yes, Toronto's got 2 games in hand. That's still not enough if they won them both. You're all coming down to goaltending. But yeah, this is going to be likely a toss-up between Florida and Tampa, with Toronto being the odd man out in that division, and then Boston being being the wild card.
So you like Washington, Boston staying in wild card position?
I do. I
do too. I don't see them, and I could be wrong. There's still 30 games left or however much, but I don't see Boston, Washington playing consistently and well enough to earn their way into the divisional aspect of it.
The one unproven for me, though, is still the New York Rangers. and I know they've been playing well. I know they got some great pieces and guys like Kreider and Fox and the Shesterkin and goal and stuff that they've put together a really unexpected run. Are they going to hold up? Can they stay away from Washington? Can they stay clear of Washington? We'll see.
Washington, New York could switch at the end of the year on where they sit. So you could see Washington. That's the one change. You could see Washington jump to second or third in the Metro, and New York fall to the wild card. That's the one thing. Again, New York done a good job. Their coach has done wonderful. They've done a great job. They compete, but again, like anything else, come playoff time, what have you done for me lately? Can they get the job done in the playoffs? It's the same argument that we are now getting into, for example, with Colorado. You've now established, you've now built your roster, you've now rebuilt, you're now here, you now have your core locked up for at least the next 5 years. You're now here. You're now tops of the West. You've been in the playoffs now how many years in a row, but you've been knocked out how many years in a row? Now you got to take that next step, or is this all brought into question? It's the same with anybody else. So New York, if they can make a run, I'll buy New York. Right now, just don't. One, they're in the East, and I just don't see them consistently enough. And two, anytime I have seen them, they don't have the consistency in their game to prove to me that they can compete for a cup, at least yet. So
they've come a long way, a lot faster, as has Detroit, than I would have given them credit for. But no, I don't believe in them out of the first round.
Believe it or not, Pittsburgh is the team for me to watch in the East. And looking at this right now, since we were so horrendously wrong about the Philadelphia Flyers, Pittsburgh is the team in looking at this to watch in the East. If you give them that rope and you give them that chance going into the playoffs, they're dangerous. They're proven. They're winners, and they're dangerous. And my gosh, who would have thought that their star player would be Evan Rodriguez?
He and Gensel, Brian Rust. I mean, there's some guys there that are just, you would have considered them middle six on their best day, and they've carried that team through injuries and have been so consistent for the last couple of years. And Evan Rodriguez since he came there this year. So yeah, you're absolutely right.
And hey, hats off to Marty St. Louis.
Yeah,
coaching job in Montreal.
Yeah, good for bringing that up.
I think he'll be a good coach. Whether he stays in Montreal or he goes somewhere else, I think he's capable of being a good coach. He knows how to work. He knows how to do it. He was undrafted. He knows it. I think he's going to do, and maybe it will be in Montreal. Who knows? But in general, I think he'll do big things wherever he goes as a coach.
Who in the world could you find that has more street cred than a 5'5" undrafted guy who won Ross trophies, Hart trophies, Stanley Cups, played 1,000 games, Hall of Famer? Like, how could you possibly find a guy that would have more credibility in the dressing room than Marty St. Louis?
Agreed. Western Conference games played, again, I know because that's a discrepancy, especially among the Canadian markets. Winnipeg, 47 games played. Dallas 47, Anaheim 50, LA 48, Nashville 49. That's all on the outside right now. Nashville, LA in your wild card position. LA tied with Anaheim. Dallas 1 point back. Winnipeg 5 points back of a wild card spot. Calgary tops your Pacific. Colorado tops your Central, with Colorado tops in the West and tops in the NHL. The way it would fall right now, Minnesota would get St. Louis, and Vegas would get Edmonton, with Colorado getting LA and Calgary getting Nashville.
This is
for sure if it started now, but
there's the Jets are probably not. I mean, they're obviously not mathematically out. They've put together a pretty good run here in the last week or 10 days. They may be able to claw their way back in, but as far as the cream of this conference goes, obviously Colorado. I am a big fan of what the Calgary Flames have done. I'm not a big buyer on anybody else. I probably would rather not play the St. Louis Blues in the playoffs. But outside of that, Nashville, Minnesota, Dallas, Edmonton certainly, or whoever squeezes in, whether it's LA, Anaheim, whoever else gets that other wild card spot. Vegas could scare you with Eichel in and having 25 games to acclimate himself. But their goaltending would concern me, especially if Leonard's banged up again now. So that goaltending.
Brissois played well last night, but one game doesn't make.
No, you're not going into the playoffs with Laurent Brossoit. No offense to the guy, he's not going to carry you through the playoffs.
So, Western Conference, if you're looking at it, I've got it pulled up if need be. But where do you see them finishing seed-wise? Does Dallas sneak in? Does Anaheim sneak in? Does anybody like Nashville or Edmonton, even a Minnesota or St. Louis at this point? Do they fall out? Does Colorado fall from the top? What happens, and where does the seeding finish?
Well, the one question that you've got to solve for is the third and fourth seeds in the Pacific. Edmonton has certainly had a tremendous amount of struggles. LA is still certainly in the midst of a rebuild, as is Anaheim, but have played extremely well. Those three teams are going to be fighting for 2 spots. So one of those 3 is going to be out. Dallas has run out a runway to catch Nashville, I believe. I don't see them doing that. Minnesota, St. Louis, Colorado's not going anywhere. They've got too big of a lead and they are too good. But as far as the rest, the 4 teams that are on top now in the Central are going to stay there. The 4 teams in the Pacific are going to have to fight off number 5, which is going to be Anaheim, LA, or Edmonton. None of which really have a legitimate shot. Vegas, Calgary, Colorado, possibly St. Louis. I'm very, very impressed with what Minnesota's done in a short time and surprised the heck out of me, but I don't think they're quite ready yet. I think they need to get further with Kapanen in goal, or
Kakkonen, yeah.
Pekka pickled peppers. I don't know. I'm not buying that. And goaltending is where I look to see the Achilles heel in all these guys.
Achilles heel. Calgary's will be Markstrom. He's played tremendously.
Yeah.
Same way Kemper has in Colorado or anything like that. Again, though, the Markstrom, just like Kemper, for the sake of objectivity, not overly proven come playoff time. So that'll be the big thing for both those clubs, again, for objectivity. So we'll see how it goes. Personal side, playoffs always make me really nervous for no matter who the Avs play. From an objective side, both conferences have the makings of some pretty good first round matchups based on where they are now and how they could fall. So it'll be exciting.
There's 4 games a night in the first round, and it's just, those are fun.
Yep.
That's really fun.
Next week we'll dive into a little more details regarding the build up to the trade deadline, any rumors we hear, anything like that. NCAA hockey is getting ready to close out their season. Get some conference and divisional champions there, heading into the conference tournaments, and then eventually the national tournament. Hopefully for them, we have moved past, and I'm not holding my breath, but hopefully we've moved past in all of hockey, not just the NCAA, losing players and forfeiting games to all the BS that have been going on. And now, if you qualify for a national tournament, you can actually compete in the national tournament without any concerns, Russian roulette style, about showing up to the rink and, now you can't play. So hopefully we're moved past that. If we are, it should be one hell of a national tournament in college hockey. BCHL is getting down to the wire. Same with the WHL. We'll touch on all that as well as the build toward the trade deadline. Thanks for joining on Zoom this week.
Yeah, this was awesome.
Appreciate it. Social media platforms, Facebook and Instagram, War Room the Hockey Podcast, at War Room the Hockey Podcast, respectively. Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. Make sure you subscribe, rate, review, share, and engage with us. We'd love to hear from you. And YouTube, make sure you subscribe, hit the notification bell. Engage with us there as well. Ask questions, anything like that. And yeah, we'll see you all next week. Thanks for joining again this week. And
my pleasure as always.
Look forward to it. I'm Evan Rauer with War Room the Hockey Podcast. We'll see you all throughout the hockey community. Cheers.
Cheers.